Hello and welcome to another Octahedroid webinar. Today we'll be talking about the state of static site generators in 2025, a guide for enterprise teams. I'm joined by Carlos Dinarte, our software engineer, and also I'm joined by Jesus Manuel Olivas, our CEO and co-founder. I'm very excited to talk about this topic that it can be feel like it's an old topic, but it's actually very current because mainly a lot of enterprises are still using this kind of technology, and that's what we'll cover today, like where SSGs actually stand today, practical solutions and challenges to this situation, and how to think about your next moves. No, like what's the next step for your organization. So let's start right away with the first question. Like, what's the real state of SSGs in today's landscape?
For a lot of people, and I'm not saying that's specifically the case or that's an issue from the tool, but for a lot of organizations, these static site generators get associated with technical debt, and that stems from the fact that you know when the hype was big with SSGs around 4 or 5 years ago, it was implemented everywhere. Maybe a lot of teams didn't do their due diligence to really, understand or see, is this really a tool for the job I'm trying to implement? Uh, because I mean, there's both advantages, disadvantages, uh, but because the hype was so big around these tools like Gatsby Next, they were the big shiny thing. A lot of teams implemented them, and now they're fighting or they're struggling with the tool because maybe they were not the best use case, or it was not the intended use for these types of tools. So yeah, I do definitely think that there's still, there is a market for them. At the end of the day, they're static site generators. I mean, they generate static files, and there's a lot of performance benefit just from that fact.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's a lot of organizations that are probably, thinking, why did we use this in the first place?
Yeah. Right. In your opinion, Jesus, what do you think is like the current state of these technologies?
Well, they are still use it a lot, right? I mean, we'll know it's a mature and supporting technology, and that it means a lot of like enterprise companies are still using them, and they are not the hype as used to be Carlos was mentioning, and totally agree with what Carlos was also mentioned about technology was abused as usual. I
Hmm.
mean, we as technologists tend to use abuse platforms, use are meant to one particular thing, then we start using it for every single thing. And at that point, things start getting more complex than it should be. But yeah, there's still, room for them. And yeah, I remember they with Gatsby was huge and then Next.js, and there was a lot of all the others, like trying to jump into the static site generation market. And as Carlos mentioned, there's a lot of benefits like generating files during build time, and then just have those files deploy and whatever. We'll talk about that. I mean, in the future, but yeah. Long story short, is there's still room for those, and I think we're gonna mention some of those spaces and things like that. And I mean, definitely there are tools that are still like relevant or still like heavily maintained. There are some others that they are not. That might be. I mean, they are more like I mean sunsetting, but we'll mention those during this conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, like from hearing what you're saying, like I understand that this technology was like what everybody was using like 5, 6 years
Mhm.
ago, and now like there's we're going through a new age of technology. Everything is AI today, and also there's a lot of new things on the market. But my question is why some organizations are still dependent on static site generators? Is it because the investment, or is there any other I don't know reason behind it? What do you
Yeah.
think on that regard?
Yeah, like Jesus mentioned, there's a lot of, investment already made into, these tools, into static site generators. And at the end of the day, I mean, there's hard advantages of using it. I mean, if you generate static files, like they're really reliable. You can place them pretty much anywhere. I mean, you can have an S3 bucket and just expose that as a site and it will work.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, like I mean, at the end of the day, uh, there are benefits, and there's a lot of maturity in these types of tools. At least things like Gatsby, things like Next, they have existed for over 4 or 5 years at this point. So yeah, like I think that's a big advantage, or that's a big concern, especially for big enterprises. We want to use something that we know is reliable, that we know it's going to work. But at the same time, maybe that was not the base use case, or they were not properly implemented, and maybe that's where a lot of concern towards these types of tools come from.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any other reason, Jesus, or basically
Yeah, I
just
think
that?
the no backend dependency on runtime. I mean it's pretty important. The performance, things like that. You can also achieve those right through caching at TDN level, things like that. But again, having having a I will say set of files that you can just put in a bucket or somewhere and just serve your site from it. It was a huge improvement. I mean, there's always a need for a server on build time, and this is where things start getting complicated when a lot of content was there. But again, having those benefits, there was a lot of benefits like security and things like that. And there are also some challenges. We'll talk in a few. But long story short, I think there's a lot of like investment in companies, and at some point maybe you have a static site with a lot of content, and you start at some point you realize you still need some dynamic sections on your site, and this is something that we have seen a lot with our customers. So people that probably should have this big static site, and when you start like moving here or there, and we totally understand how to help you with doing that. Having like helping you migrating little by little.
Yeah, like from what I understand, it's something that once you have it, it's not as easy like to turn off just like with one click, no? Like you have to have a real good strategy to move forward. And I suppose, like you
Mhm.
were mentioning, there are a lot of challenges involved. And actually, that was the next topic I wanted to dive in. Carlos, in your opinion, what are the biggest challenges this organization face today with static site generators? I think we mentioned something about build time issues, but I don't know if there are any others, or what would you add about this build time aspect?
Yep. So, well, especially like in big, well, organizations, that have big websites, thousands of pages, build time definitely starts to become a concern. Especially, this data is coming from somewhere. Most of the times it's a CMS, maybe a headless CMS. And if you start, building thousands of pages at a time, and even worse, like if you have multiple languages, so you have to build different versions of each page, it starts to add up. And yeah, we've seen, websites that, have maybe a couple of hundred pages, but, in different languages, and they start hitting like 40, 30 minutes of build time. Uh, and there's definitely, strategies to work around that. Something that we have done in the past is split the site into, smaller builds. So
Mm,
for example, if you have a blog post in your site, you have, a customer section in your site, well, maybe there's not really a dependency between the two. Like you could say they're like independent sections of the site, and you can build them separately. And that has the added advantage that if you only want to change, for example, a couple of pages in the blog section, well, you don't have to build the entire site again. Maybe
mm,
you know just that subset of the site, and that will definitely improve the build time, and and it will also make it more reliable, because if you try to build the entire site and something fails somewhere, at the end of the day, the entire build fails, the entire website fails,
yeah.
and that adds to the uh, I guess unhappiness whenever you're using the site, and maybe the bad image it gives. They're not, the build failed, we have to start over again. It's going to be next for the next 40 minutes. We have to wait if it finishes or not. So yeah, there's definitely strategies around that specific issue.
And what would you tell me about this like dynamic content needs, or sometimes like when the content needs to be updated rapidly, like what about those challenges, for example?
Yeah, so I guess that's a misconception, and well, it's based on true on facts, that since it's a static site generation, well, a lot of the times where the main benefits will come from, being static file or static sites. But that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that, we cannot have either dynamic content or maybe, like you mentioned, pages that change content dynamically or rapidly. There's always ways of working around that. Even tools, for example, Gatsby, in the recent years, or at least in the most recent updates they had, they expose way or they have native ways of, serving pages through, server-side rendering and having some sort of cache layer in between. Again, like we're uh, running into that same cycle when we create a tool that's specialized in something, but then, we stray from that happy path and we have to implement things that come from other tools, or maybe, different ways of working, around the same issue. But yeah, like to put an example, if you want to, capture information from a user, maybe, if you want to have some sort of form in the site, and that involves, having some logic to get the information, validate them, put it in a database. Just because it's a static site doesn't mean that you cannot do that. You can probably hit, something like a serverless function, some sort of lambda function or any type of backend, and you're able to get the information there, store it, and that does mean that you will have some sort of, active backend infrastructure. Um, oops, sorry. I mean, it can be serverless in the sense that, okay, it's a static function, like you don't have to manage a server per se. Uh,
Mm.
but that doesn't mean that you are unable to do things like that with a static site generator.
Right, right. There's a lot
Yeah,
of misconceptions. Yeah, sorry, Jesus.
yeah, probably your CMS can, have a way to listen to those, post events, when something, you feel something in your form in your static side and push that directly to your CMS or CRM systems. And I recall we have done things like that, even push things to Airtable, where people is happy, try,
Mm.
or spreadsheets, people is like happy to just go to those places and and manage the data. Again, there's the fact that it's static, it doesn't mean you cannot add some dynamic interaction with, for users, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yep.
It makes sense. Yeah, like it's not like you are only limited to using that technology, no? Like you can also combine it with other tools to help you have that dynamic content. Um, and what about like, for example, image processing? In that regard, would it be like the same thing? Like there's some like misconception behind using SSGs, or what do you think on that side?
Yeah, that's something, well, at least something that we've encountered heavily with Gatsby. A lot of these static site generators, they have these tools to improve the performance of the images to the end user. Maybe like they analyze, or they take all the images that are going to be included in the build, and they, generate multiple sizes, maybe even different formats for each size. Uh, because at the end of the day, that will improve the user performance. That means that, for example, if a browser supports an image format that is, uh, lighter, maybe uh, WebP, for example, not all of browsers support it, but if they're able to support it, they're usually, smaller sizes. So it means that faster loaders, faster loads, and better performance. That's always a good thing. But since that is done usually in every single build, like whenever, at least by default, if you, just include these tools and don't change anything, they are going to run a lot of times, in every single build. Sometimes they have some sort of caching, but maybe they're not reliable. And that also adds up, to the build times being, really big, or being, unreliable because of it. At the end of the day, every single little thing counts. And especially, images processing is very processing intensive. A strategy that we have done is, for example, offload that processing to somewhere else. For example, maybe you can have that being done in your CMS. Whenever you upload an image, maybe you pre-process all these images, and have them being served from the CMS. That way, uh, you can still have that same amount of performance improvements with the end user, but you're not, having or setting that responsibility to the build tool. Instead, like your data source, at the end of the day, it is the source of truth for your information that includes the images. And having them already processed there means that your build tools or your static site generator won't have to do that extra work.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree on that. The same way splitting your site, like your content site help, like small like microsites or smaller sites or however you want to call them. Splitting your type of content in your site help, it's like taking images out of the real-time equation, and as Carlos was mentioning, either going and allowing the CMS to preprocess the image, or just make sure your CMS has an integration with an external service, like Cloudinary or Cloudflare or any other like image processing service that can use like where you can push an image
Mm.
and that image will be like preprocessed and served from CDN, and then basically your CMS will take care of giving you the URL to that external service as content instead of giving you the image, the URL within the CMS or the raw image. So again, there's plenty of alternatives you can use here and to reduce the build time. And again, processing image is hard because image, it's heavy, it's a heavy process, and there's a lot of benefits on splitting on delegating that to an external service. The same as Carlos mentioned earlier, splitting your site into like multiple sites. Again, there's a lot of like, I don't say problems, a lot of like situations you need to like take care when dealing with the static site generators, but there's a lot of like options nowadays as well. Talking about like forms, as we were mentioning, I remember like Netlify has their own service that you can just push a form, like HTML form with a certain tag. I don't remember what it was, either like a tag within the form or the form element. And then whenever user submits, they catch that submission and store on their own service. Again, as similar to what we mentioned, like pushing to a like Airtable or whatever. So again, there's plenty of tooling that you can take advantage of to make sure your build times are not that don't take that long, and your user experience navigating the site it's better.
Yeah. It sounds like there's, like you said, like a lot of solutions or workarounds, a lot of technology that you can pair together in order to get the results that you want, even having a static site generator. But like now talking about like if you like putting on the table, like if you have this technology and you have all of these workarounds, like then should you really abandon your static site generator in order to be on the latest technology, or should you just go with these workarounds and use them as long as you can? Or what would you say to all of these companies that maybe have invested a lot in their current site and they are using these technologies, and now they are thinking about, okay, what's next in the next, I don't know, talking about a year or maybe 5 years, do we still use this technology, or should we abandon? Should we make a plan to stop using static site generators? Like, what would you say to those companies or enterprises?
Well, I think the answer is, as usual, it depends in way too many factors and that you need to consider. Think about this. You need to analyze and understand your edge cases. I can think about like, oh, I have a gazillions of images, or I have, a lot of like files or a lot of pages to build, or maybe I have, a lot of pages interconnected. It means when I change something in a particular piece of content, I need to reflect this change in like several pages within my site. So again, you need to understand those edge cases and understand and trying to build like a POC or MVP on the new latest technology that you want to switch to understand if that is gonna really be able to handle that particular situation. Because the happy part is simple. We have seen all those demos, and as I like to call them, like Hollywood demos, that you can just do something and it's a shiny demo that works with a easy thing, but everything is con I mean within the scope of the particular features of the framework. The API is within the app, things like that. Again, so you need to understand your edge cases. Are you building a small site? Is your site built, I mean, based on, is your content on MDX files? Is your content coming from an API or for multiple APIs? Are you working with external services, like third-party services and things like that? Again, to understand what you want to move. And I mean, I can mention another case, as I recall. So we have this client. It's a big enterprise client, so they have their static side. They still the site still some pieces in Gatsby. We are helping them to migrate, incrementally to a different technology. In this particular cases, Adobe Experience, whatever. But there's some pieces of the site, or they have like microsites. They want to they want to keep using static, static site, or they want to keep still having those features. So they were discussing to move either, upgrade to the latest version of Gatsby or something else like Astro, Next.js. And at some point, they acquire another company, and that company they acquire has a lot of like Next.js developers. So the decision was easy at that particular case. They already have the in-house, experience to manage that. So we are only helping them to take some, decisions and some architectural decisions and conceptuals about how to, go to that migration path. But again, there's a lot of like things you need to consider in order to do that. But long story short, as usual in every single migration, you should like make sure it's a gradual migration instead of going like all in full, migration. Like let's, swapping a site from another. Let's go and start as little pieces, like the block section or the resources section or some like standalone pages and trying to understand if that is gonna it's gonna work as you expected.
Right, right.
Yeah. And maybe, or phrasing it that way, should we abandon it? Like, that's a bit too extreme, I think. Especially for big organizations, that's way too risky to say like, okay, let's stop doing what we're doing and use something else. At the end of the day, I mean, it also depends, like Jesus said, on the scope of the migration. Like, if you're going to, like, if it's your own personal site, then do whatever. Like, probably you're going to have like 10, 20, 30 pages. And at the end of the day, like, there's not a big organization behind that site, so you can probably do whatever you want. But with big organization, with enterprises, with thousands of pages, it's better to have a gradual plan. Maybe as Jesus said, evaluate your needs, your edge cases, and maybe start working on once you identify, okay, these are the needs that I have, and this tool seems to be something that we can use. Then, well, okay, start setting the foundations for that migration. Maybe start with a smaller section, for example, like leveraging of that microsite, of like that split between the different sections of the site. Maybe you can start with a smaller section, maybe less critical, something that even if it goes wrong, probably won't have as big of an impact as, say, for example, you're changing, uh, I don't know, like your login pages or something like that, like something more critical. And set those foundations well, like work on that, do iterative approaches. And once it works, and you have that foundation, a working example of, okay, we can do this, we already did it on this part of the site, then we can start talking about migrating different parts, and really pushing towards that sunsetting of the technology you use towards something else, something probably different.
Yeah, yeah.
I will probably add in making sure you have a rollback,
Oh,
action that
yeah.
you can trigger, if something goes wrong. And I know it's might be more expensive because maybe for some time you will have like both sides simultaneously. And maybe you can start introducing A/B testing for those things, little by little. There are plenty of options to do a migration, but I mean, definitely it should be like like gradual migration, little by little, and making sure everything works instead of like going like all, switching the whole side, full technology. And most of the cases, I mean, and let's go back to the Gatsby conversation because we've been doing a lot of Gatsby. for static sites. Maybe you want, since you're using Gatsby, you're using React, and you want to keep a lot of those. I mean, you want to try to keep some of that work that you already done, all the investment you already done. Can I keep using some React pieces on what I want to migrate? So maybe that's another reason for
Mm.
taking a decision which technology framework you want to move to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, from what I'm hearing, it's a lot of like there's a lot of factors you need to consider, no? For example, your team, the risk behind your site, like Carlos was saying, if it's a personal site, like there's really not a lot of risk. You can do whatever, but if you have like this enterprise, all of these clients, of course, you have to think about them. But also, it's about the method, not like what I'm hearing is like we have a lot of different workarounds to actually make this technology work, or like try it out first in order to mitigate that risk. And talking about those methods, like, well, yes, like there's a lot of ways like you could still keep your static site generator, but like for someone that maybe it's sure that they want to migrate, no, like they want to migrate their site, they want to take the next step in order to continue like having this that like the latest technology on their site, like what would be like these viable migration paths for people, I don't know, maybe specifically using React or Gatsby users, like what would be like a logical options, what are the logical options forward for them?
Yep. So, we'll start if like from the perspective of an enterprise that's already using Gatsby, and again, like we're not saying that like just abandon it, but it is a good idea, especially for Gatsby, to plan ahead, since it's being sunsetted. It's not going to be probably actively developed anymore. So, going from Gatsby, I guess the natural progression would be Next.js. Like Jesus said, there's a lot of reusability. At the end of the day, both are using React, and probably you're going to be able to use the same components to some extent. Uh, but even then, like for example, a lot of times, even if we don't want to, or we want to keep, UI different from integration, maybe I've seen that pattern that a lot of companies use that. We have a package for UI, we have a different package of integrating that those UI elements into our implementation. Uh, but even if we do that, there's usually like some sort of we bleed some of the opinions or like some of the components from our framework into the components. So there's probably going to be like some changes needed to be done to those components. So yeah, like identifying those elements is the way to go. At least, for example, in Next, uh, I mean, Vercel, we also need to, consider the position of Vercel. They're focusing a lot on AI, and we've seen in the past that, they bring out features, but maybe they're not like uh, most mature, or they still have not been around for long to be calling them, mature enough for certain needs. So yeah, at least like for example, Next.js is a good contender, but you definitely have to take into account how Next.js and Vercel stands at this point, and see their roadmap to see like, okay, is this something that I'm going to work towards, and probably spend the next years working with and maintaining, or should I consider another tool for this?
Yeah, if you are deploying to Vercel, at some point it might be is using something like Next.js is the right decision because it's like pretty straightforward. And again, at some point, Next.js has, I mean, every framework has their opinions, are opinionated in some way. So if you're happy with that, it's totally fine. There's some other alternatives that we can mention. Just staying on the React, ecosystem. We can talk about React Router, which at some point, formerly Remix, but now Remix is something else. And it's probably confusing at this point.
Yeah.
And I mean, sadly, it's somehow confusing. But yeah, there's it's less opinionated than Next.js, as you can probably see. Maybe your site is already on React Router. Maybe upgrading to React Router 7 is the best option. If you're in Gatsby, there's things you can probably implement here and there. You can also have a static site. You can achieve a lot of the functionality that you can have similar to Gatsby, either or Next.js. Might be again if you have experience with your, I mean, which I mean, huge React router projects. That's, I mean, that's your, I mean, your deal going that route. Again, it will depend. Again, as we mentioned, it depends. If you want to stay on the, on the same React, maybe those, I mean, Next and React router could be an option. I know we have done some play around with Astro that can also could take advantage of React. I don't know, Carlos, you want to mention something about this?
Yeah, and Astra is an interesting tool. I mean, it's definitely less opinionated than most of these frameworks. Even from the fact that you can mix React with Vue there. I mean, I don't think that's a good idea, but that's definitely an option. Again, like from we haven't used Astra at a production level yet. We've just only used it for some internal tests. But it definitely like seems to need more, manual work. At the end of the day, like it's not as opinionated as these other frameworks, and that may be a good thing for you. Like if your team has a lot of expertise, if they have a lot of technical knowledge, then maybe for compliance of secure or for your own security reasons, maybe you want to be in control of more of aspects of your site. It could be a good idea to switch over to Astro. But again, like we've been saying, that depends, and maybe like if your team is not as confident in being able to implement these types of technology, like it will require some changes in the way you work with it. So maybe it's not the best tool for the work, but it's definitely a good option to consider.
Yeah,
Right.
and we're only mentioning, the surface of what, React, I mean, or React frameworks or tooling for. There's plenty of tools, like Vue on the Vue, ecosystem, like Vue.press or Nox or
Next.
whatever. But I want to stay on the React world for at least for this particular conversation.
Yeah. And that was actually my next question, like this decision framework for all of these technologies, like maybe it can be too much because you have like um, on one side you can still use your static site generator with other technologies, and you can have all of these workarounds that we talked at the beginning. But also we have all of these viable paths forward for React users using Next.js, React Router, Astro. But like in your experience, like if someone, like if a new client would approach to us and started to ask us like, okay, what should I do? What would be the right choice for me? Like what would be like maybe the step by step or like the approach they would have to to take in order to actually have the best set of technologies or the best technology for their particular case. Is there like any guide or what? How would you help all of these enterprises, businesses that are choosing or they are not actually sure of what to choose?
Yep. So, I mean, there's definitely, some criteria that you need to assess before, taking any decision. This, for example, like we were mentioning with your team, okay, what's your current team, expertise? Uh, how many mid engineers, junior engineers, senior engineers, you have to take that into account, especially if you're doing a big migration or like you're shifting the technology you use, that will definitely, be more maybe problematic, for less experienced engineers versus, more experienced ones. Also, like we were mentioning, okay, if you're coming from React, like using that as an example, Gatsby, if you're using Gatsby, like you probably want to stay using React. Uh, Maybe you want to switch something else, but if you're choosing a framework or a tool that already uses React, that means that your team will already have, a better level of expertise than if you're switching, for example, to into Vue, something like Nox, for example, and that would also, reduce the need to hire new people because maybe if your team is not as experienced with Vue, for example, then okay, we're probably going to need at least some sort of guidance from maybe an external. You're going to hire someone with more expertise, to guide your team, towards that goal, towards that migration. And also, what is your tolerance on, the learning curves? Like, do you want, or is your team okay, with learning, some big shift in the way we work with things, or should we want, a more gradual migration, like, and that would guide you towards, okay, maybe if we're okay with, a big change, if we have a team with big expertise, we could use something less opinionated, like Astro that we mentioned. And if not, okay, maybe we should stick with something like Next that we know, or it aligns with Gatsby, better than say Astro or some other tool.
Okay.
Yeah, and definitely considering, I mean, it's your it's like small site, smaller as a micro site. It's might be an event site that it has a few pages.
Mhm.
Is there's an API behind where the content is coming? Is content coming from like Markdown files or MDX? I mean, if those files contain React or JSX. Again, and there's plenty of things to understand and making sure you are aware of to take that decision, and also understanding like it's a static site enough. Do I need like dynamic content? Do I need to like be able to somehow update content from external source? And can I, update only that particular page? Again, it's a pretty interesting challenge, and that you will be like facing when taking a decision from a framework. And the right answer is there's no silver bullet. There will be frameworks that are better doing something than others, but in the end, it's a lot of that decision will be based on your, I mean, a lot of your own experience with frameworks and platforms as well.
Right. Yeah, yeah, like it's a decision that you definitely don't want to take lightly. So if you want to know specifically for your case, you can also reach out to us on our website on octahedroid.com and have a free consultation with Jesus or Oscar or one of our experts, and we'll let you know. It's totally free. But maybe we could share some of best practices for people that are like already in this implementation phase or thinking about how to migrate from their current static site generator to other technologies. Do you have any advice or any tips, best practices for all of these companies in this section, like in this yeah, like this migration phase?
I think we have mentioned a few, like, making sure it's a gradual migration, making sure it's little by little. So it means at some point you need to analyze your side, split your side in certain sections, as Carlos was mentioning, making sure you handle the less critical sections first, instead of like going to like the most visited page, whatever, or your homepage, which is basically like pulling content from different sources, things like that. Making sure you have a rollback action at every single, I mean, stage of the process. And again, maybe you can reuse a lot of your testing approach, and maybe you have testing in place that is already like testing your component, like regression testing. I mean, if you are going to do something like this, making sure you keep running those tests as well. If you don't have those tests, then make sure you have those tests first before start, breaking things, but making sure
Mm,
where things are broken.
yeah.
And yeah, and making sure what your goals are, and what's a success for me. I want to migrate my whole site. I want to migrate this particular section. Do I want to migrate the maybe we can still use some static pages and adding some dynamic sections on the side, maybe, blog. It's coming from different sources. Again, it's a matter of making sure what your goals are, and you have a way to understand what you're looking for. And again, it's every I mean, you can have a rollback action. It's pretty, um something you need to have, something like I can click something and everything is it's as and it was like 5 minutes ago. That's pretty important. And again, how you're testing in place to making sure you know where things are getting broken.
Right, right. Would you add anything else, Carlos?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and that goes with every single piece of, software development. Planning is the most important step. So yeah, like Jesus mentioning, having those, assessments in place, having, a clear guide, or at least a path that you want to follow, and, it really understand your needs, understand your edge cases. that will be, the most important step towards a successful migration.
Right,
And
right.
building POCs on MVPs. So instead of
Mhm.
going full with my side, just make any project a side project on it. Maybe you want to feed from the CMS for that particular section and build little pieces here and there. Again, understanding your edge case. And yeah, totally agree. Planning, it's the most important part of this process. So just make sure you don't take like that, like
Yeah,
lightly.
of course, of course. So we're getting to the end of this webinar, but just before we leave, I wanted to talk like maybe how could we help all of these companies? Like at the end of the day, we have a lot of experience or with frameworks like we used to work a lot with Gatsby, and also the team is up to date with React Router and some of these technologies. But how can we help all of these enterprises, companies through this yeah, migration phase or this decision phase? Maybe they are not ready to migrate. Maybe the like you were saying, Jesus, it's not like the best solution is not to migrate every time. Maybe you could have some workaround. Like, but how can we specifically help all of these companies
And
choosing the next step for their static site generator?
we can definitely help you with a lot of the action that we mentioned on the migration part, like helping you, do the right planning on your side, helping you understanding your side, guide you in the right direction for setting the right implementation. And again, as we mentioned, edge cases are really, really important. We can, sit with you and try to understand, again, during that planning phase, how your site was built and why certain decisions what was taken in the past. Maybe, it was done like that. And I remember that a lot on the Gatsby, the Gatsby days when the Gatsby from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, clients or customer were asking for a particular feature that was not part of the framework. So we end up building a custom building for themselves, and then Gatsby 2 or 3 implement that feature. So maybe that technical debt it's still there at some point. So we can help you understand, okay, this was built. We understand it was built because at that particular time is the framework was not ready providing that feature, so we can help you understand that thing and removing those features or implementing those features on the on a different framework, like Next.js or React Router. And again, we can help you on the planning phase, but also on executing that planning, little by little, helping you either with the migration or consulting on the migration process. And again, as you were mentioning, Flavio, we have a lot of experience with static sites and also dynamic sites, whatever, CMS sites or any content-driven sites. So we can help you, doing this, knowledge transfer from our experience to your team. So we can help you on taking the right decisions during this process that, as you mentioned, it's something you need to like really really put spend some time on it, and not taking something that simple, because moving to somewhere else at some point can give you more problems than staying with the current technology that you are.
Yeah, totally. And if you have any questions, again, you can reach out uh, directly in our website, and we will be happy to help. As Jesus was saying, a lot of we have a lot of experience here. Um, but yeah, like don't take it lightly. Be sure to plan, and also if you need help, uh, we're here to help. So basically, before we end, I wanted to recap like the key takeaways like of this webinar. Basically, I would say that your investment in your static site generator isn't lost. Like at the end of the day, it can be evolved, whether using these other solutions, other technologies, or thinking of a viable path forward of the migration, no? And if you are thinking about that migration, it shouldn't be like it should be gradual, no, and strategic. You need to have a plan, like you were saying. You need these POCs or these proofs of concept before you go all in your migration. And that because the technology you choose, and that's another key takeaway, it depends a lot on your specific context, your team, the risk, what are you willing to invest, or how much time are you willing to put into this process, if you need it right away or not. And also analyze your edge cases first and your success metrics. No, basically it's like the basis of all project is what do we want to achieve and how does that look like. No, so if you need any help with that, we can we're here for you. But I don't know if you want to add any final comments, any final recommendations for all of the people watching this webinar. Carlos, Jesus.
I mean, like Jesus said, like everything evolves pretty fast. So, uh, be sure to keep updated with the latest technology. But keep a cool head.
Mm,
Mhm.
Doing something right now doesn't mean that you need to do something else the next month. At the end of
yeah.
the day, we need to have our technology. We use it to, uh, for an objective. We try to serve a need, and as long as we do that, in a certain level of efficiency, then the tool, like again, it's just a tool. We don't need to change it just to because uh, something new just came out.
Yeah, totally agree on that. Just don't follow the hype. I mean, making sure you take the right decision. Maybe staying with the static side, it's the best option at this very moment. And do the right planning. Maybe taking this slowly and making sure you take the right decision. It's way better. So again, maybe migrating is not an option, but it is. We're happy to help.
Yeah, right. And if you want to be informed on the latest technology on modern web dev, be sure to follow Octahedroid. We are on LinkedIn, X, and also on YouTube. We are constantly publishing this kind of webinars for you to be informed. But that would be all for today. Thank you very much, Carlos, Jesus, for your time, and thanks to all of you that were watching this webinar. We hope to see you on the next one. And yeah, that would be all. Thanks for your time.